Oh, hello. So welcome to episode one of Beer with Tim, which is the podcast. And, Ben, I think given the fact that this is the very first episode with some very limited technology, a year from now, we're probably going to look back at this and kind of laugh. Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about this. So I'm Tim Blonsky, and I'm developing a consulting firm called Timothy James Consulting. And it has a particular focus on workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then just general talent acquisition, which is kind of like tied into both of those things. So I couldn't think of a better person in the world to bring on as my first guest, and obviously Ben is way too humble, so I'm the one that's got to build him up a little bit. But it's interesting, and it's completely unrelated, but. When I left my role in Connecticut to move to Idaho for my current role, it just happened to be Ben that took over my old role. So, it's kind of an honor in a way to talk to him. And, we've had some conversations over the last couple of years, and it's just fun to talk shop about all of our old friends and colleagues that you now work with, and that I miss very much. So, I'm going to open up my beer first. It's 4:30 in the afternoon here in Idaho, so that's it's almost 5 o'clock. So
it counts.
Yeah. So first of all, Ben, maybe I'll let you kind of like touch on how did we meet and what how do we know each other?
Yeah, Tim, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for having me. It's humbling, it's flattering to be here. I think to your point earlier, big shoes to fill. I'm still not sure I'm completely filling them. I might have to wear a lot of socks. But you are definitely missed out here in the Nutmeg State in so many ways. I guess to tell you a little bit about our history. We both come from the workforce system, more specifically the Workforce Board and the American Job Center Network. So Tim and I had the good fortune to connect. Gosh, it's going to be 7 years next month, if you can believe it. And at the time, Tim had actually been the manufacturing specialist here at CWP, and I was a business services specialist at the Job Center. So as you could imagine, we both were working really collaboratively in terms of employer engagement, building consensus, promoting hearts and minds around industries that have really high ceilings, and kind of moving people out of service industry-based skills into more bookable technical skills. And I think Connecticut is an amazing place to be. I do not think we necessarily compete on a global level in every industry, but I can say wholeheartedly that we are a global player on the manufacturing scene. So it definitely keeps me excited to show up for work every day, and just getting to work with great people, great colleagues, like my present company. So again, just really excited to be here.
Yeah, and speaking about that, our friend Paul LeBoy would always say that Connecticut has always been someone that's kind of a punched above its weight class in terms of it being such a tiny state. But from a domestic product standpoint, I believe maybe the numbers are different, but I remember I was at an event with the current governor was there, and I think he said something along the lines of that if Connecticut were its own country, they would have the 11th largest economy in the world, which is insane when you think about it, because from a geographical standpoint, you could probably fit 7 or maybe 8 Connecticut's in the state of Idaho. And I believe Connecticut has double the population of Idaho. So it's so interesting demographically how it's so different. But to the point, specifically about the expertise and the incredible technology that's in Connecticut. It's referred to often here in Idaho when it comes to the aerospace industry that's up in northern Idaho, which is not far from where Boeing is in Washington State. And so there's a pretty big aerospace conglomerate that's not necessarily in my particular part of the state. But there's a lot of references to like what Connecticut has. And it's called the knowledge corridor. That's like another term for it. You have I-91, and you got all those companies that are on both sides of the highway that are a big part of that. So yeah, you have a lot of work to do. There's a lot to be done there when it comes to just the general concept of workforce development. And I'm sure you're seeing in Connecticut, and I see here in Idaho, we know on a national scale, there's about 11.4 million open jobs that employers cannot fill. And a lot of, on the national scale, it's been talked about in the national conversation that it's because there's just a bunch of people that just don't want to work and just want to stay home and play video games, and that's why there's a worker shortage. But we know that when the pandemic hit, so you look at like March of 2020 to about August, September of 2020, about 3 million baby boomers all retired at the same time. And the worker shortage prior to the pandemic was about 8.8 million people that 8.8 million open jobs that employers cannot fill. So if you do the math, that's basically the number that we have today. So it's been our job over the course of the 7 years that we've known each other prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic obviously played a big role in a lot of shifts happening in the workforce, is to educate employers about how they need to change how they go about obtaining their talent. So, and so like that's the general spiel that I have, George, about, when I talk to employers and generally try to help them have a paradigm shift in how they obtain their talent. And, to that point, I'm sure you agree, and I'll let you kind of like piggyback on this, is it seems to me that the employers that have the most success in filling roles that they have a hard time filling are the employers that are in our ecosystem.
Yeah, 1,000%. There's some best practices that we know objectively move the dial, right? You're talking about regional sector partnership. You're talking about next gen models where you've got kind of a free and open transference of knowledge across organizations. Just to your point earlier about Connecticut being small but mighty, we're often known as the Constitution State. That's what it says on our license plates. But I like to think back to another nickname we have, which is the Provision State. This is maybe trivial pursuit fodder, but at the time of the Revolution, there was only one governor in the colonies who supported independence from Great Britain, and that was Connecticut's governor, Jonathan Trumbull. And he actually coined the phrase provision state because Connecticut supplied the army essentially way above its weight class. So, for such a small state, I think it speaks to that history and that legacy of Yankee ingenuity. And that's something that dates back to, the 19th, the 18th centuries. And I think, as you were mentioning, it really is a case of the squeaky wheel getting the oil. Employers who will engage and come to us, sit at the table at our regional sector partnerships, maybe offer some insights around certain proposals or funding that we might be looking at. There's a direct correlation of our ability to provide those resources, provide that funding, and do it in a way that's really industry informed at its root. So it really is a situation where, if you engage with your local workforce system, there's opportunity for us to move the dial. And, just speaking to regional sector partnership, it can often feel like, breaking bread with your enemies, like the Capulets and the Montagues getting together. But the reality is, these businesses are competing among the same talent pool. And through taking a collective impact approach, we have found that really does increase that talent pool. Because it's got to start with business, but we also have to assemble all the stakeholders around it, whether it's workforce, innovation and adoption, education, community organizations, and the rest. So I'll say cheers to all of that.
Yeah. And how many times have you heard over the course of your career? And I hear this constantly. Is like you go through your spiel, and I do my elevator pitch when I'm talking to these employers about my specific program and the particular role that I'm in my previous one in Connecticut. Is the first thing they say is like, where were you 5 years ago when I was going through this hard time? And it's interesting because the workforce system is so integral and so important to the local economy, but with the way the legislation is written with WIOA or WIOA, we've called it all different things, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, is within that, we're technically not supposed to promote our programs to the point that like it's got to be done through networking, through so and so knowing so and so, and we kind of like get to know that employer. To the point that like it is literally kept as a secret, and employers have to be proactive in going out there and obtaining that knowledge to be able to like you say, move the dial, move the needle, build our talent, be proactive in doing it. Have you had the same uh, perspective?
Yeah, 1,000%, and I think it speaks back to a few things. I think there's a general sense that we're out there, but they don't necessarily understand just the breadth and scope of what we offer. I think people know kind of this idea on an abstract level of, okay, the unemployment office or, oh, the state. And, as you mentioned, in many cases, we're either nonprofits or we're government agencies. So we're not really looking for a profit margin. And by proxy, we're a little bit more hamstrung in terms of marketing outreach. We really can't do a broad marketing campaign the way you might see in the private sector. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that I need to carry my daily interactions on a tactical level such that every time I end a conversation, my goal is to make sure that that person on the other end is an ambassador of what we're trying to do. So, if it's a job seeker, they're going to be that much more likely to tell their friends, hey, there's something of value here. Or if it's an employer, they're going to say to their colleagues, you know what, it's not going to feel like the DMV when you work with them, and they actually do move at the speed of business and not the speed of human services. We all know that workforce development is economic development, but in order for that to work, it requires just a tremendous amount of cross collaboration, whether it's agencies, training providers, and I think at the end of the day, it's emotive. It's hearts and minds. It's showing people that a career is more than just a living. A career is an opportunity to feel a sense of purpose, a sense of passion, to feel a sense of something larger. And I think that's part of why it's such a critical time for us to be in this space because, we really are at a crossroads. You look at our technical skills here in Connecticut, and it's a bit of an ageist term, but, people say silver tsunami. We've got this holding pattern essentially of all these folks who have tribal knowledge and they have no one to whom they can share it. So I think, to me, it's really exciting to get out there and be a part of that positive change and leave it better than I found it.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story of I referred to him already, but our mutual friend Paul LeBoy, who's now the chief manufacturing officer for the state of Connecticut, and I can't really think of anybody that's more perfect for that role. In his previous job, where he was the president and CEO of Kerry Manufacturing, his HR manager Pete, he brought me on a tour of his facility, and I believe that if I remember correctly, they're in Cromwell, and he introduced me to this older gentleman that was 100% Polish. At Connecticut, New Britain is the next town over. New Britain got one of the highest percentage or highest density of Polish individuals from Poland, probably in the country. And so this guy spoke only Polish, didn't speak a bit of English, and he was probably in the 70s, and they literally would not let him retire because he was the tool and die maker, and they wouldn't let him retire. They would just like keep giving him money to have him stay. So that's just a little microcosm of what's happening in Connecticut, here in Idaho as well. And one of the tools that we have really worked hard on is registered apprenticeship as a way for employers to basically take a high school student and build the skills and kind of like start their career in a kind of a parallel pathway where they're doing their education and the work experience at the same time, rather than it being the traditional pathway that we've seen over the last, several decades of high school, you graduate high school, you go to college for 4 years, you put yourself in $70,000 debt, and then hopefully you have a job on the other end. And so like we've been really pushing the model of registered apprenticeship, which I know Connecticut's a little different in the apprenticeship space, but I know it's still something that's very much emphasized as a way to really help the employer build the program that is a credentialized way for them to build the workforce. And again, you're going to your local community college to take a few classes or through your local technical high school, and you're working at the same time. You get on the job learning, and you have a career while you're in high school or by the time you graduate. And so I'm sure you agree with me that's really the model that employers must use these days.
Completely. I think part of the allure to an industry like manufacturing is there's just such a high ceiling. And, it really is the opportunity to get in on a ground level, especially when we're going through transformative disruption like Industry 4.0. You're kind of seeing the collision course between manufacturing and IT. And I think it won't be too long when we're kind of talking about both in the same breath. You mentioned, registered apprenticeship, and I think to me it's actually a vehicle of DE and I, because what you're saying is objectively, you get XYZ skill regardless of your color, your gender, your sexual orientation, you're going to get ABC promotion. So it really kind of levels the playing field for everyone. And I think one of the issues is people have a tendency to bifurcate a job in the skilled trades or job in manufacturing and continuing education. They see it as an either or, and it's really not. It's really not mutually exclusive. I think what I'm seeing, at least with the employers I support, we do a lot of work on incumbent worker training, for example. You can get into manufacturing and still pursue a career, and the odds are you can pursue an education, and the education you're going to pursue, to me, is much more bookable than what you might do at a traditional four-year school. So part of it is getting the word out to counselors. Part of it is kind of unpacking that stigma of, our success as a school council unit is how many people go to college. Because the truth of the matter is manufacturing is an economic multiplier, right? Every dollar invested in manufacturing is conservatively $2, optimistically $5 in the economy. So we know the data shows it. I think what we need to do is demystify the industry, because unlike retail or banking, people just don't know what goes on behind those walls. And I think if we could take people in there, they would realize that it's not what you assume. These aren't flames-looking ceilings. These are clean, climate-controlled environments, and more so, teams and cultures where leadership really wants to make their people feel valued. I can't tell you how many times manufacturers, especially small ones in our region, will have a food truck, or will take a step to kind of show their employers how valued they are. Just a week ago, a manufacturer here in Connecticut, the Lee Company, agreed to actually pay for all of the monthly deductibles for their employees, which is, to me, radical. But it just goes to show you that there's creative ways to incentivize people to come on board. But we, in general, just need to do a better job of shining a light on that, because it's not something you can boast in every industry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I said, in part of my spiel when I was talking to manufacturers in Connecticut, talking to people that were unemployed or underemployed, and they were like looking for, that next thing. And manufacturing, like, no, why would I want to do that? I want to be able to keep my hand. I don't want to be cut off because I put my hand in the machine, and and so like that would be the whole thing. And I would have to say, well, these are like lab-like environments where you actually, in some of these places, you actually wear a white coat and you can eat off the floor, it's air conditioned and it's blah, blah. And yeah, it's the same thing that we see here, but it's interesting because when we're talking about workforce programs, the general concept of those blue-collar jobs are the ones that involve some of the hands-on training, and then those white-collar jobs are the ones that involve you having to go through a four-year, university or college. But that's not necessarily the case. We have many registered apprenticeships in the medical space, and one of the selling points that I try to make when I talk to high school students here in the state of Idaho is, let's say you want to become a registered nurse. So there are two pathways you can take. You can do the linear pathway of high school, college, and then you go to BSU, Boise State University, famous for the bright blue football field.
Smurf turf.
Yes. And so like that's like the premier college in Boise, and that would cost an average student anywhere from $85,000 to $110,000 from beginning to end to become a registered nurse. Or you can become a medical assistant while you're in high school. You go to the local community college, take a few online courses, you get some certifications. Now you're an employee of like St. Luke's Hospital, which is the main hospital system of Boise. And you finish your apprenticeship, now you're an employee. Now you're getting paid through tuition reimbursement to go to BSU for free while you're doing your education, and you're getting all the hands-on clinical work. You're working on multiple floors in hospitals, so you're getting more experience than you ever would get going to a four-year college and just doing all the classes. Does it take longer? Yes, but you're not in $110,000 debt. So apprenticeship is really applicable across all those fields, and it's been interesting because when I talk to employers, they're like, "Oh, I had no idea we could do that." And so I feel that someone with my expertise, and obviously Ben, your expertise as well, is really needed to really get the word out to more than just a small cross section of employers that we're able to talk to in our current roles. So like I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to like be a part of that and to go really across the country, because I'm sure you agree, Ben. I could pick up and go to, just pick a state, the state of Arkansas, and just call up the Ben Clapp in Arkansas and say, hey, what do you have going on? How can I help this employer? And would be able to have pretty much the same conversation that you and I have, and we speak the same language. And and then that way it can really help the employer get connected to those programs and help them navigate the incentives that are potentially provided. That's a whole big thing. I know in Connecticut it's a little different here in Idaho, but you can really give a pretty good amount of money to employers to help offset some of the cost involved in training current or any new employees that are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, as much as we would like to clone the people who have that institutional and tribal knowledge, we're not there yet, and I'm not sure that's a moral thing to do. But what we're trying to do is really shallow that learning curve however we can. And if we can find ways methodically and systematically to front load that out of the shop floor and into our training vendors, through our one stops, to me, that's a huge win. Part of it too is understanding that, it's about the long game. And, if you look at a model like registered apprenticeship, for example, it really kind of levels the field for everyone, as I mentioned earlier. It kind of takes out the politics. To me, it's a very linear, you get this for that. And I think one of the things that is really exciting here in Connecticut is our list of trades that we recognize as being congruent with apprenticeship is always changing and growing. So, they say 30% of the jobs 20 years from now don't exist. It's a very fluid model, and I think it's not quite as rigid or institutional as maybe the stigma sometimes suggests.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And real quickly to your point about the DEI aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're seeing on the national scale through the Federal Department of Labor with a lot of funding that's been going into registered apprenticeship, because some guy named Joe Biden is very big on registered apprenticeship and was way back when he was vice president. And so there's a lot of money going into it, and DEI is being integrated into that model, which I find to be quite interesting. But now I have probably the most important question that I need to ask about all this is the beer that you're drinking. I just have to ask because, like what I'm drinking is from Western Collective, which is a brewery in Boise that it's pretty good. I've mentioned to you in some of our previous conversations that I'm a beer snob, and Connecticut is probably the best brewery region in the country. And obviously I have a lot of bias in that, but so you have to tell me what you're drinking.
Definitely. And, a lot of our manufacturing here in Connecticut is high complexity, low volume, but I think there's so many subsectors within that space. And obviously, breweries are one of my favorites. So this is actually one of my very favorite breweries here in the state. It's a brewery out of Canaan, Connecticut called Great Falls. And this is their Lime Rock Lager. I'm also a bit of a car guy. I don't know if you can see that in the frame, but the theme of the beer is basically Lime Rock Park. You might not know it, but if you're a racing fan or if you're familiar with Connecticut, it's about a 1.8-mile road course in Lakeville, Connecticut. And I think it's most famous for being kind of the home track for Paul Newman, another great Connecticut product, if I may say so myself.
Yeah. I did not. I had no idea that you were a car guy. And obviously the group text that we have with the other mutual friend, that's pretty much all we talk about cars. I'm really looking forward to seeing a Corvette E-Ray in person. I am lusting after that car. I will fully admit that I need it. I want it. Will it happen one day? I don't know. I mean, will I even be able to buy one? Because they're probably already all like spoken for, even though they haven't built them yet. Just a heads up, we have about 8 minutes left before we're done with this. So let me kind of touch on something else that is of extreme importance. NFL football, the playoffs are happening. We got the NFC, we got Philadelphia and Giants, we got San Francisco and Dallas, and then in the AFC we got Kansas City, which we hate, and Jacksonville, and then the Buffalo Bills, my team, against Cincinnati. Who do you think is going to go all the way?
Well, I'm not. I know you might think I'm trying to like play to the audience. I do think Buffalo is one of the contenders. Um, it pains me to say this. I feel like I'm taking years off my life as a Giants fan, but on the NFC side, I kind of feel like it's Philadelphia's to lose this year. It's a great fan base when they're not throwing batteries at Santa Claus. Um, who will know? I'm just beyond myself with joy that the Giants are back in the playoff picture, and it feels like the NFC East is once again like a pretty pedigreed division. Commanders notwithstanding, it is kind of cool to see three of the four teams from the division in the postseason. But I'll say probably Buffalo, Philly, and I think maybe this is Buffalo's time to be a bride and not a bridesmaid. So I'm going to say Buffalo. And again, I'm not just currying favor with the host.
Can you imagine those two fan bases clashing in the Super Bowl? Like, I think if there's any other fan base that is as crazy as Bills Mafia, probably Philadelphia. I mean, they're famous for the riots and burning police cars after championships, and I don't know, that'll be very interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like Victory Ale versus Genesee, Philly cheesesteaks versus beef on weck. I'm thinking about this from a very food-based area. Maybe it's because it's around dinner time out here in Connecticut. But yeah, I think that would be exciting. And there's a great rivalry between those two cities. The Flyers and the Sabres. There's history there, so I think it would be many things, not the least of which lively.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think we'll just kind of close off with this. I just really want to speak to, Ben, like I'm sure you agree, like when you kind of get into your 40s, or, I'm actually not sure how old you are, but I know you're not that much younger than me. We're kind of in that same range. Is like you get to a point in your life in which it's really not about the quantity of funds, it's about the quality of funds. And so I could probably think on literally one hand and not even a full hand of like the friends that I consider friends, and you're one of them. So thank you for your time. I know it's late for you; it's 7 o'clock your time already. So really appreciate the time that you've given me for this, and I'm looking forward to premiering this to the world and showing like what our expertise, and hopefully a lot of people will get some value out of us.
I know they do, Tim. And again, I just can't say how humbled and flattered I am that you chose me to be on your podcast, let alone your inaugural podcast. I feel like that's worth a celebration in its own right. We are the same age, close. I'm 41, so we're kind of in an odd space where we're not Gen X, but we're not quite a millennial. I guess it sounds like a Britney Spears song. Not a girl, not yet a woman. Uh, but I think it's such an exciting time to be in this work, and I think we share the same value. As much as we want to be able to buy that Corvette, I think we do it for the cause, not the applause. And I just salute all the work you do, and I'm humbled by the talent of the people I get to work alongside, and you're certainly a prime example of that. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, you have a good evening, sir, and obviously we'll be in touch. And again, thank you for your time, and have a good night.
You do the same, sir. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.